Imagine waking up one morning and feeling like something is different, not outside of you, but in you. Your room is the same, your reflection hasn't changed, but something inside you has gone quiet. The old stories don't grip you, the old emotions don't stick. The old identity, the one you've rehearsed for years, suddenly feels like a costume you're no longer willing to wear. You're not broken, you're simply remembering. Because here's what no one told you. Most of who you believe you are was never yours to begin with. It was installed, programmed, reinforced by teachers, by media, by pain, by survival. You inherited more than genes. You inherited belief systems, ones that have quietly shaped your choices, your fears, your relationships, your reflection. And the craziest part, you didn't even notice, because the old self doesn't arrive with a warning. It arrives as a whisper, as a habit, as a familiar thought at 7 a.m. telling you, don't expect too much today. It lives in the way your chest tightens before a risk, in the way you downplay your own brilliance, in the patterns you swore you'd never repeat, but still did. And when you repeat it long enough, it no longer feels like a pattern, it feels like a personality. But what if that personality is just a memory, a loop, a defense strategy coded so deeply into your nervous system that it now masquerades as your identity? Let's go deeper. Your old self isn't just a collection of thoughts, it's a frequency, like a radio station. And unless you change that frequency, unless you stop playing the same inner song every day, your reality can't truly shift. You can visualize, you can script, you can meditate. But if you wake up and emotionally embody the same energy as yesterday, the field responds with precision, because the quantum field isn't random, it's coherent. It mirrors your state of being, not your wish list. So if you keep being the you who expects disappointment, guess what? More doors close. If you keep identifying with fear, reality amplifies it. Not because you're being punished, but because the field, the universe, your own subconscious, is loyal to what you embody. Not what you say, not what you post, not what you affirm once in the morning. What you are on a vibrational level, chemically, emotionally, energetically, becomes the blueprint of the reality that collapses around you. And here's the truth that breaks the loop. You don't need to force your reality to change. You only need to stop embodying the self who keeps collapsing the same version of it. You are not stuck because your future isn't real. You're stuck because your identity keeps triggering the same quantum response. You wake up in the morning, open your eyes, and without realizing it, become yesterday's version of you. Again. Same thoughts, same body chemistry, same emotional blueprint. That's not just a routine, that's a broadcast. And the field, the space of infinite possibility, tunes in and says, "Ah, I know this signal. Send them more of the same." But you are not here to loop. You are here to shift, and not through effort, through alignment, through vibration, through memory, not of your past, but of your highest potential, the version of you that already exists in a parallel frequency, the version of you who's not begging for love, but radiating it, not hoping for abundance, but being it. That version is not in the distant future. It's not waiting on a perfect calendar date. It already exists, encoded in the field, available, reachable, but only if you let go of the identity that's addicted to the past. Yes, addicted, because the old self isn't just familiar, it's chemically comfortable. It feels safe to expect less. It feels normal to play small. It feels responsible to assume things won't work out. These aren't random emotions. They're rehearsed, recycled, memorized by your nervous system so deeply that breaking the loop doesn't just feel scary, it feels like death. Because part of you, the part that was formed in response to trauma, failure, abandonment, believes that letting go of this identity is a risk. What if I try and fail? What if I'm seen and rejected again? What if I lose control? But here's what your soul already knows. That identity was built to protect you, not to expand you. It helped you survive, but it's now keeping you from becoming, from thriving, from remembering. Because thriving requires surrender. It requires releasing the narrative that says, "I am not enough yet." It means waking up and saying, "I no longer collapse the past." It means becoming someone new, not by adding, but by subtracting, by peeling off the layers of performance, of pattern, of programming, until all that's left is essence, frequency, presence, truth. This is the observer effect in action. You are the observer. And the moment you observe your old self, truly see it without merging with it, you create the power to collapse it. The quantum field responds to the state of the observer. When you become aware of your identity as a pattern, instead of identifying with the pattern, you rise above it. You exit the loop. You change your signal. And reality, by law, must reflect that change. So take a breath and feel into this. You are not your patterns. You are not your history. You are not the chemical cocktail of emotions you've been waking up to for years. You are the awareness beneath it, the consciousness watching it. And that consciousness is not limited. It is not small. It is not trapped. It is the selector, the tuner, the gatekeeper of your timeline. And the moment you choose differently, the moment you stop rehearsing your past identity, the field reorganizes. Reality bends. The story begins to rewrite itself, not because you tried harder, but because you remembered who you really are. Let's pause here, not to slow down, but to look inward. Who do you wake up as each day? Not who you want to be, but who you default to, before the affirmations, before the intentions, before the rituals. There's a brief silent moment when the old self takes the wheel. It whispers, "Be careful. Don't expect too much. Play it safe." And it does so not because it's malicious, but because it was wired to protect you. This identity, this personality you wear, was crafted in response to what hurt. Rejection, betrayal, abandonment, shame. And what protects you becomes you. Until it's not just a trauma response, it's your reality. Not because it's true, but because it's practiced. This is the hard truth most people never confront. Your life is not a reflection of what you desire. It's a reflection of who you believe yourself to be. The version of you that wakes up every morning carrying the weight of old emotions, unresolved memories, quiet guilt, and inherited fear. That's the frequency shaping your world. And most people try to change their life from the outside in. New goals, new job, new partner. But inside, the frequency hasn't shifted. They're still broadcasting the same emotional signal, and the quantum field never lies. Think of your emotional state like a radio tower. You don't get to lie about what you're transmitting. You may speak abundance, but if you feel lack, the field hears lack. You may visualize love, but if you embody unworthiness, the mirror shows you more distance. Not because you're unworthy, but because the field, by law, reflects what is coherent. It doesn't argue, it doesn't debate, it tunes in and responds. So how do you shift this? You begin not by adding more affirmations, but by removing the interference, the static, the emotional addiction to being the person who always gets left, or never gets seen, or constantly has to prove their value. These aren't just thoughts. These are chemical states your body memorized. You've rehearsed them so long they feel like home, even when they hurt. And here's the paradox. Your nervous system is more loyal to familiar suffering than it is to unfamiliar peace. So when joy shows up, you resist it. When opportunity knocks, you sabotage it. When love arrives, you mistrust it. Not because you don't want it, but because the identity you're wearing doesn't recognize it as safe. This is what it means to be energetically misaligned. You're trying to collapse a new timeline while living in an old signal. And no amount of action can override your vibration, because the field doesn't respond to what you do, it responds to who you are. And if who you are is still echoing pain, doubt, shame, or fear, the signal won't land. The doors won't open. The shift won't sustain. And that's not a punishment. That's precision. That's quantum law. But here's where the miracle begins. The moment you become aware of this loop, truly aware, you stop being the loop. You become the observer. And once you become the observer, you shift the timeline. Because now, you see the old self as a pattern, not as truth. You start to hear the thoughts differently. Instead of obeying them, you question them. Instead of feeling shame, you feel curiosity. Instead of merging with the emotion, you breathe into it. Long enough to realize, this isn't me. This is a memory, a chemical, a habit. And when you recognize a pattern as a pattern, it loses its power. This is the identity reset, not a surface rebrand, but a soul-level recalibration. And it begins with one radical decision. I will no longer collapse the same reality by being the same version of myself. That's the line in the sand. That's the moment the timeline begins to bend. You don't need permission. You don't need credentials. You don't need proof. You need to choose with your breath, with your emotion, with your energy. And that choice, echoed over days, weeks, and moments of testing, becomes your new broadcast. And yes, there will be tests. The old self won't vanish quietly. It will try to return, not to ruin you, but to confirm you, to ask, are you still me, or have you shifted? And every time it appears, in your thoughts, in your posture, in the old urge to shrink or apologize or play small, you will have a sacred opportunity to pause, to breathe, to remember that you are no longer broadcasting that version, that you are no longer collapsing that timeline, that you are no longer identifying with the story that kept you looping. And the more you do that, the more the field adjusts. First subtly, a stranger speaks to you differently. An opportunity you didn't expect arrives. You notice your triggers soften. You notice your breath deepen. You stop reacting from wounds and start responding from wisdom. And while the outer shifts may seem slow, the inner shift is already instant, because the field bends at the speed of coherence. And the moment you become the version of you who lives your vision, not hopes for it, embodies it, the codes rearrange, the program rewrites, the geometry of your life shifts into a new alignment, and what you once chased, you now attract. Not because you forced it, but because you matched it. That is the observer effect, not a mystical theory, but a lived experience. And it begins with one internal switch. I choose a new signal. Not later. Now, not once. Daily. Not with words. With presence. With choice. With feeling. So let's ask the question that breaks the loop. Who do I need to stop being in order to start aligning? Not what do I want, not what should I do, but who am I no longer willing to perform as? The answer to that question is the doorway. Not because you have to destroy the old self, but because you are ready to retire it, with love, with gratitude, and most importantly, with finality. Let's now meet the old self, not to shame it, but to understand it. The self that fears disappointment, not because it lacks courage, but because it learned early on that hope was dangerous. The self that over-explains everything, not because it loves detail, but because it's terrified of being misunderstood. The self that laughs too quickly, apologizes too often, or plays small in the presence of intensity, not because it's weak, but because it was once punished for being visible. These aren't flaws. These are survival strategies. And for a time, they worked. They helped you navigate rejection, loneliness, failure. They helped you find a place in a world that didn't see the real you. But the longer you wear them, the harder it becomes to remember what's underneath. Because the old self doesn't just live in your memories, it lives in your muscles, your posture, your chemistry, your breath. You breathe shallowly when you expect criticism. You slouch slightly when you expect to be overlooked. You tense your voice when you expect to be dismissed. These aren't just habits, They are biological anchors, and each one silently broadcasts a signal to the field, a signal of self-doubt, of hypervigilance, of unworthiness. And the field, always exact, always responsive, echoes back experiences that confirm those frequencies. So, what happens when you stop identifying with these patterns? At first, confusion. Your system might panic. It might say, wait, if I don't act this way, will I be safe? Will I be accepted? And that's when the deeper work begins. Not the work of performance, the work of embodiment. Because change isn't just about releasing the old self intellectually, it's about rewriting your entire energetic signature. Every cell in your body has to hear the message. It's safe to shift now. This is why superficial change doesn't stick, because beneath the new habits, the old signal is still running, and the field doesn't respond to your routine, it responds to your resonance. That's why you can read all the right books, journal your goals, listen to hours of affirmations, and still feel like nothing moves, because you're broadcasting from the same signal tower. And the tower must be rebuilt, not with bricks of thought, but with emotion, presence, and radical honesty. Let's get honest now. What emotion do you live in most consistently? Is it fear, shame, regret, anger? What if those emotions aren't random, but rehearsed? What if your body is addicted to them? What if every time you feel that emotion, you reinforce the identity that creates the reality you're trying to escape? And what if the only way to change your life is to stop rehearsing who you're not? This is not about forcing positivity. That's surface-level alchemy. This is about becoming energetically incompatible with your old self. So incompatible that your nervous system no longer finds comfort in suffering. So incompatible that your biology no longer responds to stress as a default. So incompatible that when the old emotion rises, you pause, not to suppress it, but to witness it, to feel it fully, to say, I see you, I've known you, but I no longer need to be you. And that's when something extraordinary happens. The old self starts to dissolve, not violently, gracefully, like smoke rising from a fire that's lost its fuel, and in its place, space opens. Space for something new, something ancient, something aligned. But here's what most people miss. The new self doesn't appear as a lightning bolt. It appears as a choice. One breath, one moment, one shift in posture, one softer reaction, one more grounded response. The new self lives in the tiny rebellions, the sacred pauses where you do something different, where you stop performing, where you stop protecting, where you stop waiting, and instead, you remember. I am not the version of me I was trained to be. I am the frequency I choose to embody. So choose again. Choose presence over panic, truth over performance, stillness over control. Choose to become someone your past wouldn't recognize, not because you're running from your story, but because you're rewriting the ending. And that's where identity work becomes identity liberation, because you're no longer becoming something new. You're returning to something true. You're stripping away everything that was installed, the labels, the roles, the masks, until all that's left is you. And that you doesn't hustle for healing, doesn't audition for belonging, doesn't shrink to fit, that you simply is, fully, radiantly, incoherently real. And when you live as that, the field takes notice, reality bends, people respond to your energy before you even speak. Doors open that logic can't explain. Timelines collapse in your favor, not because you forced them to, but because the old frequency that kept them locked no longer exists. This is how you know the shift is real. Life begins to feel lighter, not easier, lighter, like you're no longer dragging a suitcase full of stories you didn't write, like you're no longer carrying a name that doesn't reflect your soul, like you're no longer trying to impress a world that doesn't even know who you are. You're just being. And that being, that signal, begins to ripple outward, calling in experiences, people, and opportunities that match the new resonance. You're not chasing your future anymore. You're inhabiting the version of you who already lives it. And every time you breathe into that self, with love, with reverence, with courage, you strengthen the signal. You solidify the timeline. You become the observer who changes the observed. You collapse the past and create the present in the same sacred moment. And the field responds. Always. So how do you embody the new self when the old self still lingers? How do you hold a new frequency when your nervous system still speaks in the language of fear? The answer is simple, not easy, but simple. You train your field, not with information, with repetition, with ritual, with resonance. You become the version of yourself that your past never believed was possible, by being that version before the world confirms it. This is where most people fall short. They wait for the evidence before they shift. They wait for the money to arrive before they feel abundant. They wait for love to appear before they feel worthy. But the field doesn't work that way. It mirrors being, not hoping. It reflects embodiment, not longing. So if you want the field to change, you must go first. You must wake up and choose to feel how your future self would feel. You must breathe as they would breathe, walk as they would walk, make decisions as they would make them. Not because you're pretending, but because you're tuning in. You're broadcasting a new signal, and the universe, obedient, coherent, mathematical, will begin to reorganize around you. But this takes courage, because every time you align with your new self, your old self will resist. It will whisper doubts. It will summon old emotions. It will recreate circumstances that tempt you to collapse back into the version of you that's familiar. And you will have to remember, this is not regression. This is verification. The field is asking, are you sure? And every time you say yes, not with words, but with presence, you imprint the new identity deeper. You reinforce the new frequency. You raise your baseline from memory to mastery. And this is where ritual becomes essential. You don't change by force. You change through sacred repetition. You create morning practices that tune your vibration. You walk differently. You speak slower. You breathe deeper. You touch the world with more intention. And in doing so, you inform the field of your new signal. This is quantum manifestation, not the fantasy of instant change, but the discipline of vibrational alignment. You're not casting spells. You're becoming a signal, a tuning fork for timelines that already exist, waiting to be selected, stabilized, embodied. This isn't magic, it's mechanics. Because every thought is electric, every emotion is magnetic, and together they create your vibrational address. That address determines what arrives. So ask yourself, what are you a match for today? Not in theory, in chemistry, in breath, in baseline emotion. If you're vibrating shame, you're a match for delay. If you're vibrating trust, you're a match for alignment. The field doesn't care what you say. It responds to what you transmit. That's why embodiment matters more than explanation. That's why ritual matters more than reasoning. That's why being it, even before it arrives, is the most powerful declaration you can make. Let's get practical. Take a moment to visualize the version of you who already lives in your expanded timeline, the one who stopped apologizing, the one who no longer plays small, the one who speaks with clarity and walks with grace. See their face, feel their presence, notice their posture, their breath, their silence. Now ask, what did they let go of to become this aligned? What fear did they no longer obey? What emotion did they stop broadcasting? What story did they refuse to carry one more day? The answer isn't abstract, it's somatic. You'll feel it in your body. A memory might rise, a voice might protest, a fear might activate. Good. That's the residue. That's the release. That's your signal shifting. You don't run from it. You stay. You breathe. You witness it. You name it. And then you let it go. Not violently, but decisively. You thank it. You bow to it. And you retire it. This is the power of identity work. It's not about fixing who you are. It's about unsubscribing from the self that never reflected your truth. And once you do, the quantum field notices. The mirror responds. The algorithm of your life begins to populate with different outcomes, not because the code changed, but because the user did. That's the part we forget. You are not locked in. You are not frozen. You are not a victim of fate. You are the user. You are the coder. You are the selector. You are the frequency that determines what becomes real. And that power has always been yours. So don't just hope for change, become it. Don't just visualize the future, transmit it. Don't just want a new reality. Walk as the version of you who already lives there. And when you do, something extraordinary begins to unfold. The people around you shift. The world around you reorders. Patterns begin to crack. Synchronicities begin to multiply. And not because the universe has changed, but because you have. This is your return, not to the past, but to your original signal, your natural resonance, your unshakable truth. And once you live from that place, the old identity can no longer magnetize reality. The old chemistry no longer holds power. The old narrative no longer repeats. You've upgraded the source code, and everything must update to reflect it. So now, the question becomes sacred. Who am I willing to be, right now, without needing my past to explain me? Not who others believe you are, not who you were forced to become, but the version of you that's been waiting beneath the armor, behind the mask, underneath the stories. The version of you that isn't built on wounds, but on wisdom. The one who isn't hustling for worthiness, because they are worth itself. You're not stepping into someone new. You're returning to someone ancient, someone infinite, someone who already knows how this story ends, because they've already lived it on a parallel frequency. And now, you are tuning in. That's the great paradox. The future you want isn't somewhere far away. It's already written. But the author, you, had to change pens, had to stop writing in the ink of fear, had to stop using pages stained with guilt, had to drop the old tone of shame. Only then could the story evolve. And that story begins with a ritual, a simple one, a breath, a choice, a shift in posture, a new thought allowed to enter unresisted, a moment of feeling joy without justification. These tiny acts, they're not small. They're timeline collapses. They're moments where you reject the echo of your old self and instead broadcast something new. So let's anchor this shift, not in words, but in embodiment. Wherever you are right now, pause, breathe, let the old self rise. The thoughts, the emotions, the beliefs, see them, don't judge, just witness. And then, from your center, say mendiu amchinmenti. Say. I no longer collapse the past. I now tune into who I truly am. Say it again. I no longer collapse the past. I now tune into who I truly am. Let the vibration of that truth move through your body. Let it recalibrate every cell. Let it remind your system, this is who we are now. Because when the shift is real, the body knows. You breathe differently. You walk into rooms with quiet confidence. You stop waiting for the future. You start becoming it. And in doing so, you become someone your past never met, but your soul always remembered. And yes, your old self may visit, not to destroy you, but to be witnessed one final time. It may show up in a reaction, a thought, an old trigger. But this time, you won't merge with it. You won't fight it. You'll simply greet it, smile, say thank you, and walk on. Because you're not abandoning your past, you're integrating it. You're honoring the survival it gave you, but refusing to let it script the next chapter. That's true mastery, not perfection. Presence, choosing to stay in resonance even when the world doesn't yet reflect it. Holding your frequency even when the outcome is uncertain. Embodying your truth, even when no one claps. Because you no longer live for validation. You live for alignment. And that alignment is now your magnet. So what happens next? Miracles. Not because you chased them, but because you became coherent with them. The field will bend, patterns will break, people will either rise with you or fall away, and your life will feel unfamiliar. Not because it's wrong, but because it's finally right. This is the real timeline shift, not in external conditions, but in internal coherence. When your energy becomes the match for a higher reality, the field doesn't resist, it responds, and it does so instantly, not always in form, but in feeling. That feeling of peace without a reason, of certainty without evidence, of joy that doesn't need proof. That is your confirmation. That is your guide. So here we are, the end of the illusion, the beginning of the real. You've remembered, you've released, you've retuned, and from this moment forward, you walk differently, not because you have to, but because the old version no longer fits. You are not your fear, you are not your timeline, you are not your pattern, you are the observer, the chooser, the frequency. You are the one the field has been waiting for, and now that you've shifted, everything else will too. If this message made you feel something stir inside, don't scroll away. Drop a comment and tell us what hit you hardest. Your likes and subscriptions help this channel stay alive in the algorithm and reach others waking up just like you. Stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, this reality is not what it seems, and neither are you. Until next time, this has been Mystery School.